The metal corridors of Nexus Prime stretched endlessly in every direction. The massive space station hung in the void between three star systems, far from any home world. This was where the galaxy's best came to learn how to fight, how to lead, and how to survive. Tae-woo Kim walked through the halls with his head down, carrying his training gear. Other cadets moved around him like he was invisible. Some were twice his height. Others had 4 arms or scales that could stop bullets. A few glowed with their own light. He was human. That made him different. That made him weak in their eyes. The way Galactic Military Academy had been training warriors for 300 years. Every species that joined the galaxy sent their finest young people here. The Gorvani sent their strongest fighters. The Naxari sent their smartest tacticians. The Catherians sent their most deadly hunters. Earth sent 12 humans. Tae-woo reached his dormitory and touched the panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, his roommate Brixton was doing push-ups. The Gorvani was built like a mountain, of muscle and bone. His gray skin was covered in scars from training fights. Each push-up made the floor shake a little. "Little human," Brixton said without looking up. "Did you finish your homework?" Tae-woo set down his gear and sat on his narrow bed. "Yes." "Good. I might need to copy it later." Brixton stood up and flexed his massive arms. "The tactical planning class is too boring for real warriors." Tae-woo said nothing. He had learned that silence was safer than arguing. Brixton was not the worst of the alien cadets, but he was not kind either. He saw humans as pets that could talk. "Tomorrow we have combat training," Brixton continued. "Try not to embarrass yourself too much. Instructor Veltar likes to use the weak ones as examples." The Gorvani laughed and left the room. Tae-woo stayed sitting on his bed, staring at his hands. They looked so small compared to Brixton's, so fragile. He thought about home. Earth was a blue and green ball spinning around a yellow star. It was beautiful from space, but Tae-woo remembered the history lessons, wars that lasted decades, cities turned to ash, millions dead from diseases and bombs and bullets. The other species in the galaxy thought humans were lucky. They believed Earth's first contact with aliens had gone well by accident. A small human patrol ship had fought off some raiders and won. The galaxy noticed and invited Earth to join. What they did not know was that the raiders had attacked a hospital ship. The human patrol had found bodies floating in space. Men, women, and children killed for no reason except that they were weak. The patrol ship had not just fought off the raiders, they had hunted them down. Every single raider ship was destroyed. No survivors. No mercy. But the galaxy did not know that part of the story. Tae-woo opened his tablet and reviewed tomorrow's schedule. Physical training at dawn, weapons practice after breakfast, then combat class with instructor Veltar. He had heard stories about Veltar. The Catherian was 3 meters tall with arms like spears. His species evolved on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. They had no concept of mercy or restraint. Veltar had killed 17 people in combat before becoming an instructor. The Academy allowed it because Catherians only killed when threatened. The problem was that they saw everything as a threat. Tae-woo's tablet chimed softly. A message from So-Jin Park, another human cadet. "Study group in 10 minutes. Room 247. He grabbed his notes and headed out. The human cadets met every few days to share information and help each other. It was unofficial, but the instructors allowed it. Most species did the same thing. Room 247 was small and poorly lit. So-Jin was already there with Minho Lee, Yoonji Choi, and Jae-sung Wang. The other humans looked tired, but alert. "How was your day?" So-Jin asked as Tae-woo sat down. "Brixton wants to copy my homework again." "Let him," Minho said. "It keeps him happy." Yoonji pulled up a holographic display. I have been watching the other species, learning their fighting styles. The Gorvani use brute force. The Naxari rely on speed and poison. The Catherians hunt alone and strike without warning. What about us? Jae-sung asked. Eunji was quiet for a moment. We adapt. We learn. We survive. Sojin nodded slowly. The instructors think we are weak, because we do not have claws or armor or natural weapons. They do not understand that we do not need them. Tae-woo looked at his fellow humans. Sojin was small, but moved like water. Minho seemed relaxed, but his eyes missed nothing. Yoonji could solve tactical problems that confused alien computers. Jae-sung was quiet, but when he spoke, everyone listened. They did not look like warriors. That was the point. Tomorrow is combat. Class, Tae-woo said. The room went silent. They all knew what that meant. Veltar would choose someone to demonstrate on. He always chose humans because they looked weak and harmless. Remember what we practiced, Sojin said softly. Control, patience. Do not show them what we really are. Not yet, Tae-woo thought. But someday, the meeting ended and the humans returned to their rooms. Tae-woo lay on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the small window, he could see stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Home. His grandfather had fought in the last great war on Earth. Millions had died in that conflict. Cities were destroyed. Entire countries disappeared from maps. But humans had survived. They always survived. The old man had told Tae-woo stories before he left for the academy. Stories about battles fought in mud and blood, about soldiers who kept fighting even when their bodies were broken, about the things humans did when everything they loved was threatened. We are not the strongest, his grandfather had said. We are not the fastest or the smartest, but we are the most stubborn. We do not give up. We do not quit. And we never forget. Tae-woo closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Veltar would try to humiliate him in front of the class. The other species would laugh and think humans were weak. Let them laugh. Let them believe their stories about lucky humans and accidental victories. Let them think Earth was just another peaceful world full of soft creatures. The truth would come out eventually. It always did. Humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other efficiently. They had invented weapons that could destroy planets. They had fought wars that lasted generations. They had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have ended most species, and they had done it all while learning to work together, to cooperate, to build something better. The galaxy had no idea what they had invited to join them. Tae-woo smiled in the darkness and fell asleep. Tomorrow, Instructor Veltar would learn his first lesson about humans. It would not be the lesson he expected to teach. The combat training hall was the largest room on Nexus Prime. The ceiling disappeared into shadows high above. The floor was covered with thick mats that could absorb the impact of a falling Gorvani. Weapons racks lined the walls, filled with training tools from dozens of worlds. 200 cadets stood in perfect rows, each species grouped together by instinct. The Gorvani towered over everyone else, their gray skin gleaming under the harsh lights. The Naxari coiled and uncoiled nervously, their serpentine bodies never still. The Catherians clicked their mandibles in what might have been conversation. The 12 humans stood together in the back corner. They looked tiny compared to the other species, fragile, harmless. Instructor Veltar entered the hall like a nightmare come to life. 3 meters tall and covered in black chitin armor, he moved with the deadly grace of a perfect predator. His 4 arms ended in razor-sharp claws. His compound eyes reflected the light like dark mirrors. Today we learn about joint manipulation, Veltar announced. His voice was like grinding metal. Every species has weak points. Knowing these weak points can save your life in combat. The cadets listened in silence. Veltar was famous throughout the academy. He had never lost a fight. His species, the Catherians, were born hunters. They felt no pain and showed no mercy. Who can tell me the 3 primary joint manipulation techniques? Veltar asked. Several cadets raised their hands. Veltar ignored them all and walked toward. The humans, you, he said, pointing a claw at Taewoo. Human, come forward. Taewoo felt every eye in the hall focus on him. He walked to the center of the mat, his footsteps silent on the thick padding. Behind him, he heard Brixton chuckle. What is your name, human? Veltar demanded. Taewoo Kim, sir. Tell me about human joints, Cadet Kim. Are they strong? Taewoo looked up at the towering instructor. Veltar's compound eyes showed no emotion, no warmth, no recognition that Taewoo was anything more than a training tool. Human joints are flexible, sir. They allow for a wide range of movement. Flexible. Veltar seemed to taste the word. Yes, flexible means weak, easy to break. Some of the alien cadets laughed. The Gorvani were the loudest. They found human fragility amusing. I will demonstrate proper restraint techniques using the human, Veltar announced. Watch carefully. These methods work on most humanoid species. Veltar grabbed Taewoo's right hand with one of his claws. The grip was firm, but not painful. Yet. The human hand contains 27 bones, the instructor said, holding up Taewoo's hand for the class to see. Most are small and fragile. A simple twist can disable an opponent. Taewoo felt the pressure increase on his fingers. Veltar was being careful not to actually hurt him. This was just a demonstration, so far. Notice how the human does not resist, Veltar continued. This is because he knows resistance will only cause more damage. Smart prey learns to submit. The words hit Taewoo like a physical blow. Prey. That was how Veltar saw him. Not as a student, or even as a person. Just prey. Behind the instructor, Taewoo could see the other humans. Sojin's face was carefully blank, but her hands were clenched into fists. Minho looked relaxed, but his eyes had gone cold. Yunji was watching, everything with the intensity of a computer recording data. Now I will show you what happens when prey tries to fight back, Veltar said. Without warning, he twisted Taewoo's index finger sideways. The bones snapped with a sound like a breaking stick. The hall went completely silent. Taewoo did not scream. He did not cry out or fall to his knees. He just stood there, looking down at his broken finger. The bone was clearly displaced, sticking out at an unnatural angle. As you can see, Veltar said, human bones break easily. This is why they are not suitable for real combat. Several alien cadets laughed again, but the sound was nervous now. Something about the human's reaction was wrong. He should have been in agony. He should have been begging for medical attention. Instead, Taewoo slowly raised his head and looked directly at Veltar. The instructor found himself staring into dark eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience no young cadet should possess. Is the demonstration finished, sir? Taewoo asked. His voice was perfectly steady. For the first time in decades, Veltar felt something he had almost forgotten, a tiny prick of unease. Prey animals were supposed to show fear when injured. They were supposed to submit completely. This human was not acting like prey. The demonstration is not finished, Veltar said, his grip tightening on Taewoo's arm. Next, we will cover shoulder dislocation techniques. In the crowd of cadets, something shifted. The humans had gone completely still. Not the stillness of fear, but something else. Something that made several of the more perceptive alien species take an unconscious step backward. Sil-Ara, a young Naxari with excellent survival instincts, felt her scales begin to twitch. Every instinct her species had developed over millions of years of evolution was suddenly screaming danger. But that was impossible. The human was tiny and injured and helpless. Wasn't it? Sir, Sojin said from the crowd. Perhaps we should call medical personnel for my classmate. Veltar turned his compound eyes toward her. The human is not seriously injured. A broken finger is nothing. Continue watching. He grabbed Tae-Woo's upper arm and began to apply pressure to the shoulder joint. This would be more painful than the finger, but still within acceptable training limits. Or so he thought. Tae-Woo looked down at his broken finger, then back up at Veltar. Very carefully, very deliberately, he reached over with his other hand and popped the broken bone back into place. The crack echoed through the silent hall. Tae-Woo flexed his repaired finger. It was still damaged, but functional. He had just performed field surgery on himself without even flinching. Proceed with your demonstration, sir, he said calmly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Some of the alien cadets were now backing away from the demonstration area without realizing they were doing it. Brixton stopped laughing. Veltar felt another flicker of unease, stronger this time. In his 3 centuries of life, he had never seen anything react to injury the way this human just had. The creature had fixed its own broken bone like it was adjusting a piece of equipment. What kind of species learned to do that? But Veltar was Cytherian. He did not back down from anything, ever. Very well, he said, increasing the pressure on Tae-Woo's shoulder. Let us continue. Behind them, the other humans exchanged glances. Yoonji gave an almost invisible nod. Minho's breathing had become very slow and controlled. Jae-sung was no longer looking at the demonstration at all. He was scanning the exits. They knew what was coming next. They had seen Tae-Woo angry before. Once. During a training exercise back on Earth, another cadet had made a joke about the hospital ship that had been destroyed by raiders. The ship Tae-Woo's sister had been working on when she died. The medical team had needed 30 minutes to put the other cadet back together. Sir, Sojin tried again. I really think we should stop the demonstration now. Veltar ignored her completely. He was focused on the human in his grip, trying to understand why every predatory instinct he possessed was suddenly telling him to let go and back away. It was just a human. Weak, fragile, harmless. He applied more. Pressure to the shoulder joint, preparing to demonstrate a standard dislocation technique. Tae-Woo looked up at him one more time. When he spoke, his voice was soft and conversational. Sir, I need you to let go of my arm now. It was not a request. Veltar's compound eyes studied the small human in his grip. 3 centuries of hunting and killing had taught him to read body language perfectly. Prey animals always showed the same signs when cornered. Fear, desperation, the trembling that came before total collapse. This human showed none of those signs. You are in no position to make demands, Prey, Veltar said, his voice carrying the cold certainty of a perfect predator. I am conducting a lesson. You will remain still until I am finished. Tae-Woo nodded slowly, as if accepting the logic of this statement. Yes, sir, I understand. But something was wrong. The human's acceptance felt like a trap somehow. Veltar had captured thousands of creatures over his lifetime. None of them had ever surrendered with such quiet confidence. The instructor pushed the feeling aside. Cytherians did not fear anything, especially not tiny mammals from a backwater world. As I was explaining, Veltar announced to the class, shoulder dislocation is achieved through controlled pressure applied at specific angles. He demonstrated by increasing the force on Tae-Woo's arm. The joint began to strain under the pressure. Any normal species would be crying out in pain by now. The human remained perfectly silent. Notice how the prey attempts to mask its discomfort. Veltar continued. This is a common defensive behavior among weak species. They believe that hiding pain will make predators lose interest. Some of the alien cadets nodded in understanding. The Gorvani especially appreciated this insight into prey behavior. But others were becoming uncomfortable. Silara, the young Naxari, was now coiled tightly in anxiety. Her species' danger sense was screaming warnings she could not understand. The human looked helpless. But something about the situation felt wrong. Instructor Veltar applied more pressure. Tewu's shoulder joint moved to the very edge of dislocation. One more twist would separate the bones completely. At this point, Veltar explained, most species will beg for mercy. They will offer information, surrender completely, or attempt to bargain for their lives. He looked down at Tewu expectantly. The human looked back up at him with dark eyes that seemed far too old for his face. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. Instructor Veltar, have you ever been to Earth? The unexpected question caught Veltar off guard. What? Earth. My home world. Have you visited it? Of course not. Why would I waste time on such an insignificant planet? Tewu nodded as if this made perfect sense. That's unfortunate. You might have learned something useful there. Such as? We have a saying on Earth, Tewu said calmly. Never start a fight you cannot finish. Veltar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Is that a threat, little human? No, sir. It's advice. The instructor decided he had wasted enough time on conversation. He twisted Tewu's arm sharply to the left. The shoulder, joint separated with a wet popping sound that echoed through the silent hall. Tewu's arm now hung at an unnatural angle, completely dislocated. The pain should have been overwhelming, should have dropped him to his knees, screaming. Instead, he reached across his body with his other hand and popped the shoulder back into place with another loud crack. The hall fell into absolute silence. Thank you for the demonstration, sir, Tewu said politely. Was there anything else you wanted to show the class? Veltar stared down at the human in complete bewilderment. In 3 centuries of life, he had never encountered anything that could casually repair its own dislocated shoulder. The creature had not even changed expression. What was this thing? How did you do that? Veltar demanded. Practice, Tewu replied. We learn basic field medicine on Earth. Broken bones and dislocated joints are common injuries in our training programs. Training programs? Yes, sir. We start learning combat techniques when we are children. By the time we reach military age, most humans can function with minor injuries like these. The instructor's unease was growing stronger. Combat techniques? But humans are a peaceful species. Your files indicate no major conflicts for decades. For the first time since the demonstration began, Tewu smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Our files are incomplete, sir. Earth has been peaceful for exactly 43 years. Before that, we fought wars constantly for about 10,000 years. 10,000 years of war. Veltar's voice carried a note of disbelief. Give or take a few centuries. We're not very good at keeping track of time when we're busy killing each other. In the crowd of watching cadets, the other humans had gone completely motionless. Sojin's face was carefully blank, but her eyes held a warning. Minho looked like he was meditating, but his hands were positioned for instant movement. Yunji was still recording everything, but now she looked like she was planning something. Jae-sung had moved closer to the exit. You're lying, Veltar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Tewu asked. Have you read our complete military history, sir? Or just the summary file that got us admitted to the academy? Veltar had only read the summary. It described a minor skirmish with raiders that Earth had somehow won through luck and primitive tactics. The report made humans sound like children who had stumbled into a victory. The summary is sufficient, he said. The summary mentions that we destroyed some raider ships, correct? Yes. A small patrol defeated a larger force through accidental tactical advantages. Tewu's smile grew wider. How many raider ships were destroyed, sir? The report indicates 12 vessels were eliminated. Correct. And how many Raider survivors were recovered? Veltar paused. He tried to remember the exact wording of the report. The document states that no survivors were found. That's also correct. We killed them all. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every cadet in the hall could feel the weight of them. The Raiders attacked a hospital ship, Taewoo continued in that same conversational tone. They killed doctors and nurses and patients, people who could not fight back. So we hunted down every single Raider ship in the system and destroyed them completely. That's standard military procedure, Veltar said, but he sounded uncertain. Is it? When the Raiders sent out distress calls, we jammed their communications. When they tried to surrender, we ignored their signals. When their ships were disabled and helpless, we boarded them and finished the job by hand. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. We did not take prisoners, Taewoo said quietly. We did not accept surrender. We did not show mercy. We hunted them like animals and killed every single one of them because they hurt innocent people. Veltar found himself taking an involuntary step backward. The human was still standing exactly where he had been placed for the demonstration, still looking small and fragile and harmless. But the words coming out of his mouth painted a picture of calculated, methodical violence that made even a Catherian hunter feel uncomfortable. "You're trying to frighten me with stories," Veltar said. "No, sir. I'm trying to explain why you should let go of my arm now." "I am not holding your arm." Taewoo looked down. Veltar was right. At some point during the conversation, the instructor had released his grip completely. He was now standing almost 2 meters away from the human. When had that happened? "Thank you, sir," Taewoo said. "Should I return to my position with the other cadets?" Veltar wanted to say yes. Every instinct he possessed was telling him to end this demonstration immediately and send the human back to his place in the crowd. But he was Catherian. He was a perfect predator. He did not back down from anything, especially not from tiny mammals with delusions of competence. "No," he said, stepping forward again. "The demonstration is not complete. I have not yet shown the class-proper restraint techniques for subduing resistant prey." Behind the instructor, 200 alien cadets watched in fascination and growing horror as their most feared teacher reached for the small human once more. Taewoo sighed softly. "Sir, I really wish you wouldn't do that." The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Veltar's claw hovered inches from Taewoo's arm while 200 cadets held their breath. The combat hall, usually filled with the sounds of movement and whispered conversations, had become as silent as the void between stars. Something fundamental had shifted in the room. The alien cadets could feel it, even if they could not understand it. What had started as a routine demonstration was becoming something else entirely. Brixton, the massive Gorvani, who had been laughing earlier, was no longer amused. His small brain was struggling to process what he had witnessed. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to break easily and beg for mercy. This human had repaired his own broken bones like they were mechanical devices that needed adjustment. Silara coiled and uncoiled nervously, her serpentine body moving in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Her species had evolved on a world where the ability to sense danger meant the difference between life and death. Every scale on her body was screaming warnings, but the danger was coming from a human. That made no sense. Near the back of the crowd, the other 11 humans had arranged themselves in a loose circle. To any casual observer, it looked like they were simply standing together for comfort, but anyone with military training would recognize the formation immediately. They were covering all possible exit routes. Sojin Park stood with her arms relaxed at her sides, but her weight was balanced on the balls of her feet. She looked like she was ready to move in any direction at a moment's notice. Her dark eyes swept the room constantly, cataloging positions and distances. Minho Lee appeared to be breathing deeply, as if trying to stay calm. In reality, he was oxygenating his blood for explosive action. His muscles were loose and ready, like a coiled spring waiting for release. Yoonji Choi continued to observe everything with cold, analytical precision. Her mind was recording every detail, building tactical assessments, calculating probability matrices. She had already identified 14 different ways this situation could escalate, and prepared responses for each one. Jae-Sung Wang had moved to within 3 steps of the nearest exit. His position looked casual, but he could reach the door controls, in under 2 seconds if necessary. More importantly, he could prevent anyone else from reaching them. Instructor Veltar sensed the change in atmosphere, but could not identify its source. His compound eyes scanned the crowd of cadets, looking for signs of unrest or rebellion. Everything appeared normal. Too normal. "You seem nervous, human," he said to Tae-woo. "Are you finally beginning to understand your position?" Tae-woo looked up at the towering Catherian with those unsettling dark eyes. "My position, sir?" "Prey," Veltar stated flatly. "You are prey. I am predator. This is the natural order of things." "Ah," Tae-woo nodded thoughtfully. "I think there might be some confusion about that, sir." "Confusion?" "Yes, sir. You see, humans don't really have predators." Veltar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Every species has predators, human. Even my people fear certain creatures." "What do you fear?" Tae-woo asked with genuine curiosity. The question caught Veltar off guard. Catherians did not discuss their weaknesses with other species. But the human's tone was so conversational, so innocent, that he found himself answering. "The void hunters of the rim worlds. They are larger than us, and their exoskeletons can withstand direct plasma fire. So you avoid them?" "When possible, yes." Tae-woo nodded as if this made perfect sense. "That's smart. Running away when you're outmatched is good tactics." "It is survival," Veltar corrected stiffly. "Same thing, really. But here's what confuses me, sir. Humans never learn to run away. Impossible. Every species runs from superior predators." "Do we?" Tae-woo asked. "What was the largest land predator on Earth when humans evolved?" Veltar accessed his basic xenobiology files. According to records, various large carnivores, cave bears, saber-toothed, cats, other primitive hunters. Correct. And humans killed them all. You adapted tools to overcome physical disadvantages. That is normal evolution. Is it? Most species develop tools for gathering food or building shelter. Humans developed tools specifically for killing things that were bigger and stronger than us. Veltar was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with this conversation. The human's words carried implications he did not want to consider. "The Academy files indicate that Earth's megafauna went extinct due to climate changes," he said. Tae-woo shook his head slowly. "Climate change was a factor, but not the main cause. Humans hunted them to extinction on purpose. We killed everything that tried to eat us." The hall had become so quiet that individual heartbeats were audible. Alien cadets who possessed enhanced hearing could detect the steady, controlled breathing of the 12 humans. It sounded like a military unit preparing for combat. "You are attempting to intimidate me with false bravado," Veltar declared. "No, sir. I'm trying to help you understand why this demonstration is a bad idea. Because you will be embarrassed. In front of your classmates? Because you might get hurt." The words hit the combat hall like a physical shockwave. Several alien cadets actually stepped backward. A human had just threatened a Catherian instructor, a species with no natural. Weapons had just warned a perfect predator that it might be in danger. Veltar's entire body went rigid with fury. His forearms spread wide, claws extended to their full length. His compound eyes blazed with reflected light. Did you just threaten me, Prey? No, sir, Tae-woo replied calmly. I gave you advice. There's a difference. What difference? Threats are what you make when you want to avoid violence. Advice is what you give when you're trying to help someone. And if I ignore your advice? Tae-woo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft and sad. Then you'll learn why humans don't have predators, sir. Veltar reached for Tae-woo's arm again. This time, he was not planning to demonstrate restraint techniques or joint manipulation. This time, he was going to teach the arrogant little mammal what happened when prey forgot its place. His claw moved toward Tae-woo's shoulder. Behind him, 11 humans shifted position slightly. The movement was almost invisible, but every alien cadet with functional survival instincts felt it like a cold wind. Sojin's breathing became very controlled and rhythmic. Minho's hands moved to a more natural position. Yoonji stopped recording and started calculating. Jae-sung took one step closer to the exit controls. They were not moving to protect their classmate. They were moving to contain the situation. Sir, Sojin called out one final time. Please don't do that. Veltar ignored her completely. He was focused entirely on the small human in front of him. This creature needed to learn its place in the galaxy's hierarchy. It needed to understand that predators were always superior to prey. His claw touched Tae-woo's arm. The human looked up at him with an expression of deep regret. I'm sorry, Tae-woo said quietly. I really tried to warn you. For one perfect moment, the combat hall was completely silent. No movement, no sound, no vibration. Even the station's life support systems seemed to pause. Then Tae-woo moved. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for decades. Combat instructors would study the recordings frame by frame, trying to understand how a small human had done what every alien expert said was impossible, but none of them would ever truly understand the lesson Veltar learned in those next few seconds. Humans were not prey. They never had been. Time seemed to slow down as Tae-woo moved. Later, when the Academy's computers analyzed the security recordings, they would clock the entire sequence at 4.7 seconds. But to the 200 cadets watching, it felt like watching a master artist create a deadly masterpiece. Veltar's claw was still moving toward Tae-woo's arm when the human stepped slightly to his left. The movement was so small, so economical, that most observers missed it entirely. But it meant that Veltar's grab would miss by exactly 2 centimeters. The Catherian instructor, committed to his attack, found himself slightly off balance as his claw closed on empty air. It was a minor miscalculation, barely noticeable. It was also fatal. Tae-woo's right hand moved in a short, sharp arc that caught Veltar's primary arm just above the elbow joint. The impact was precise, surgical, and devastating. The human's small fist struck with the force of a hammer blow, but more importantly, it struck at exactly the right angle to hyperextend the joint. Veltar's arm bent backward with a sound like snapping wood. The Catherian's compound eyes went wide with shock and pain. In 3 centuries of life, nothing had ever moved fast enough to surprise him. Nothing had ever hit him hard enough to cause real damage. This human had done both in the space of a heartbeat. But Tae-woo was not finished. As Veltar's primary arm snapped backward, the human stepped closer instead of retreating. His left hand grabbed the instructor's secondary arm and twisted, using the Catherian's own momentum against him. Veltar, trained to fight opponents who would try to escape his reach, had no defense against someone who moved toward danger instead of away from it. The secondary arm's shoulder joint separated with a wet popping sound. Veltar tried to strike with his remaining limbs, but Tae-woo was no longer where the instructor expected him to be. The human had moved again, flowing like water around the Catherian's defenses. His hands found pressure points that Veltar did not even know he possessed. A nerve cluster just below the third arm's joint. A stress point where chitin met flesh. a tiny gap in the Catherian's natural armor that exposed vulnerable muscle. Taewoo's fingers pressed, twisted, and struck with mechanical precision. Each movement was calculated to cause maximum damage while positioning him for the next attack. He fought like a computer program written for destruction. Veltar's third arm went numb, then useless. The Catherian instructor, now reduced to a single, functional limb, finally understood that he was not fighting a student. He was fighting something that had been designed by evolution and training to kill things much larger and more dangerous than itself. He tried to back away, but Taewoo followed him step for step. The human's dark eyes showed no anger, no emotion, at all. He looked like a craftsman completing a routine task. Veltar's final arm lashed out in desperation. The claw passed within inches of Taewoo's face, sharp enough to cut through steel. Taewoo caught the arm at the wrist and elbow simultaneously. For a moment, the two figures stood locked together, the massive Catherian trying to overpower the tiny human through sheer strength. Then Taewoo shifted his grip slightly and applied leverage. The arm broke in 3 places. Veltar collapsed to his knees, all 4 limbs now damaged beyond use. He stared up at the human in complete bewilderment. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Catherians were apex predators. They did not lose fights to prey animals, but this human was not prey. Veltar finally understood that now. "I'm sorry," Taewoo said again, and he sounded like he meant it. "I really didn't want this to happen." The entire combat hall was frozen in shock. 200 of the galaxy's finest young warriors stood paralyzed, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Their most feared instructor, a creature that had never lost a fight in 3 centuries, was now kneeling helplessly before a human cadet. Brixton, the massive Gorvani, felt something he had never experienced before: fear, real, primal terror that made his muscles lock up and his breath catch in his throat. The small human he had been mocking and bullying was not weak at all. He was something else entirely. Silara's danger sense was no longer screaming warnings. It had moved beyond warnings into pure panic. Every instinct her species possessed was telling her to flee immediately, but her body would not obey. She was frozen like a small animal caught in the gaze of a predator. But the predator was not Veltar. Near the back of the hall, the other humans remained perfectly still. They had not moved to help their classmate because they had known he would not need help. Sojin's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a mixture of pride and regret. Minho looked like he was breathing normally again. The immediate crisis was over. Yoonji was still calculating, but now she was running damage control scenarios. How to contain the aftermath, how to minimize the political consequences, how to maintain the careful facade that humans preferred to. Project Jae-sung had moved away from the exit. If anyone tried to leave the hall right now, they might spread panic throughout the station. That could not be allowed. "Medical team to combat Hall 7, an automated voice announced. The station's sensors had detected the injuries and dispatched help automatically. Taewoo looked down at Veltar and then around at the crowd of staring cadets. He could see the fear in their eyes now. The careful calculations about human weakness had been replaced by something much more primitive: terror. "This was a training accident," he announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Instructor Veltar was demonstrating combat techniques and sustained injuries during the exercise. I provided emergency first aid to prevent further damage." It was a lie, and everyone in the hall knew it. But it was also an offer. Accept this version of events, and things could go back to normal. Pretend that humans were still weak and harmless. Pretend that nothing had changed. Several alien cadets nodded eagerly. They wanted to believe the lie. They needed to believe it. But others were not so easily convinced. They had seen what the human was capable of. They had watched him dismantle a Catherian instructor with surgical precision and mechanical efficiency. Medical team arrived and began treating Veltar's injuries. The Catherian was conscious but in shock. His compound eyes kept focusing on Tae-woo as if he could not quite believe what had happened. "How?" Veltar whispered. Tae-woo knelt beside him while the medics worked. "Humans have been fighting for a very long time, sir. We've gotten good at it. But you're so small. Size doesn't matter as much as people think. Speed matters. Precision matters. Understanding your opponent's weaknesses matters." "What are you?" Veltar asked. Tae-woo was quiet for a moment. When he answered, his voice was so soft that only Veltar could hear him. "We're what happened when prey learned to hunt back." The medical team finished their preliminary treatment and prepared to transport Veltar to the station's medical bay. As they lifted him onto a stretcher, the instructor's eyes remained fixed on the human who had destroyed him so effortlessly. "Class dismissed," Acting Instructor Sojin announced. She had automatically assumed command when Veltar became incapacitated. No one questioned her authority. The alien cadets began filing out of the hall in small groups, whispering urgently among themselves. But many kept glancing back at Tae-woo, as if they expected him to transform into some kind of monster. As the hall emptied, the 12 humans gathered together. They stood in a loose circle, not speaking, just being present with each other. Finally, Minho broke the silence. "How long before this reaches the Academy administration?" 3 hours, Yunji replied without hesitation. "Maybe less if someone sends a message to their home world." "And then?" Sojin answered that one. "Then everything changes." They all knew what she meant. For months, they had been playing a careful game, appearing weak enough to be ignored but competent enough to remain in the academy, letting the other species think humans were harmless newcomers who had gotten lucky in their first contact with the galaxy. That game was over now. Tae-woo looked around at his fellow humans. "I'm sorry. I tried to handle it without violence." "No," Sojin said firmly. "You did exactly what you had to do. He forced the situation." "The question is what happens next," Jae-sung added. They all looked toward the exit where the last few alien cadets were disappearing. Soon, word would spread throughout the station. Then to the Academy administration. Then to the various governments and military commands scattered across the galaxy. Earth's secret was out. Humanity was no longer just another member species trying to find its place in galactic civilization. They were something much more dangerous. News traveled fast on Nexus Prime. Within an hour of the incident, every cadet on the station knew that a human had destroyed Instructor Veltar in single combat. Within 2 hours, the story had reached the Academy administration. Within 3 hours, emergency meetings were being called across the galaxy. Academy Commandant Zurgoth sat in his private office, staring at the security recording for the 15th time. The massive hegemony general had commanded fleets in 12 major conflicts. He had seen every form of combat the galaxy had to offer. He had never seen anything like what the human cadet had done to Veltar. "Play it again," he ordered his aide. The holographic display showed the combat hall from multiple angles. Zurgoth watched the human's movements frame by frame, analyzing each strike, each shift in position. The precision was inhuman. The efficiency was terrifying. "Sir," his aide said nervously, "perhaps we should contact Earth's government? This incident could cause diplomatic problems." Zurgoth waved a dismissive appendage. "Diplomatic problems are the least of our concerns. Pull up Earth's complete military files." "Sir, those files are classified above my clearance level." "Use my authorization codes. I want everything. Every conflict, every weapon system, every tactical manual they have ever produced." The aide's fingers danced across the control interface. Data began flowing across the screens surrounding Zurgoth's desk. Population figures, industrial capacity, resource allocation, military organization, and then the historical files began loading. Zurgoth's primary eyes widened as the numbers appeared. Earth's recorded conflicts went back over 10,000 years. The casualty figures alone were staggering. Hundreds of millions dead in single wars. Entire continents devastated. Cities turned to radioactive ash. "This cannot be correct," he muttered. "Check the translation protocols." "Translation is accurate, sir. Cross-referenced with multiple databases." Zurgoth scrolled through more files. The Second World War alone had killed more humans than most species contained in their entire populations, and it was just one of hundreds of major conflicts. "Sir," the aide said quietly, "there's something else. I'm seeing references to something called nuclear weapons. Display the technical specifications." The screens filled with data that made Zurgoth's blood freeze. Weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Bombs that could render planets uninhabitable for centuries. Earth possessed thousands of them. "How many other species have developed nuclear weapons?" Zurgoth asked. "According to galactic records, sir, 3. The hegemony developed limited nuclear capability 2 centuries ago, but abandoned. It is too destructive. The Void Hunters created nuclear weapons but never used them in actual combat. The Crystalline Collective and humans?" The aide was quiet for a long moment. "Humans have used nuclear weapons in warfare, sir, multiple times, against their own species." Zurgoth felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. A species that would use planet-killing weapons against their own people. What would they do to aliens? Continue the briefing. "Their conventional weapons are equally concerning, sir. Chemical weapons, biological agents, directed energy systems, kinetic bombardment platforms." "How many casualties in their most recent major conflict?" "The files indicate their last global war ended approximately 80 years ago. Estimated casualties, sir, this can't be right." "Give me the number." 73 million dead, sir." "In a single 6-year conflict," Zurgoth stared at the display in growing horror. "Earth's primitive species had killed more of their own people in one war than most galactic civilizations had lost in their entire recorded histories." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. The screen displayed the image of Fleet, Admiral Kextar, military commander of the Gorvani Defense Forces. "Commandant Zurgoth," the admiral said without preamble, "I understand there was an incident involving human cadets at your academy." "Yes, Admiral. One of our instructors was injured during a training exercise." "Injured?" Kexatar's voice carried a note of disbelief. "My sources indicate that a human cadet disabled Instructor Veltar completely. Is this accurate?" Zurgoth hesitated. Military protocols required him to report all significant incidents to member species governments. But something told him that spreading this information too widely might be dangerous. "The incident is under investigation," he said carefully. "Commandant, I need to know if humans represent a threat to my people. The cadet who defeated Veltar is reportedly small even by human standards. If this is representative of their capabilities..." "I understand your concerns, Admiral. I am reviewing Earth's military records to assess the situation." "What have you found?" Zurgoth looked at the screens surrounding his desk. Casualty figures in the hundreds of millions. Weapons capable of sterilizing worlds. A species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing. "I recommend that you review Earth's complete files yourself, Admiral. I will forward you the access codes." The transmission ended, leaving Zurgoth alone with his aide and the terrible weight of discovery. He had been so focused on the human cadet's actions that he had not considered the larger implications. If one human could defeat Veltar, what could a trained human military unit accomplish? What could Earth's entire armed forces do if they decided the galaxy posed a threat? "Sir," the aide said quietly, "I'm receiving similar communications from other member species. They all want information about human capabilities." "Stall them. Tell them we're conducting a comprehensive review." "Yes, sir. Should I contact Earth's representatives?" Zurgoth considered this carefully. Earth had been invited to join galactic civilization based on incomplete information. The Galactic Council had assumed humans were a typical peaceful species who had gotten lucky in their first combat encounter. Now, he was learning that Earth might be the most dangerous military power the galaxy had ever encountered. No, he decided. Not yet. First, I want to speak with the human cadets directly. An hour later, the 12 human cadets stood at attention in Zurgoth's office. They looked exactly like what they were supposed to be, young students learning to serve in the galactic military. Small, fragile, harmless, Zurgoth had watched the security recordings. He knew better. "Cadet Kim," he began, "please explain what happened in Combat Hall 7. Taewoo's expression remained perfectly neutral. "Sir, Instructor Veltar was demonstrating restraint techniques. He sustained injuries during the exercise. I provided emergency first aid." "First aid?" "Yes, sir. When someone's joints are dislocated, the proper response is to realign them immediately to prevent further damage. You realigned his joints by breaking his arms in multiple places." "Sir, Instructor Veltar's anatomy is different from human." "Anatomy. I may have miscalculated the necessary force. It was a blatant lie, and everyone in the room knew it. But it was also a warning. Accept this version of events, or face the consequences of the truth." "Cadet Park," Zurgoth continued, "you assumed command of the class after Instructor Veltar was injured. By what authority?" So Jin's answer was immediate and precise. "Emergency Protocol 7, sir. In the event that a ranking instructor becomes incapacitated during training, the senior cadet present assumes temporary command until proper authority can be established. You are familiar with our emergency protocols?" All human cadets memorized the complete academy regulations before arrival, sir. We wanted to avoid any misunderstandings. Zurgoth studied the 12 humans more carefully. They stood in perfect formation. Their answers were textbook precise, and their behavior was absolutely correct according to military standards. They were also the most dangerous individuals he had ever encountered. "I have been reviewing Earth's military history," he said carefully. The humans exchanged brief glances. Sojin spoke for the group. "What would you like to know, sir? Is it true that humans have engaged in large-scale warfare for most of your recorded history?" "Yes, sir." "And that these conflicts have resulted in casualties numbering in the millions?" "Often much higher, sir." "And that Earth possesses weapons capable of destroying entire planets?" Sojin was quiet for a moment. When she answered, her voice was steady but somehow apologetic. "Sir, every technologically advanced species eventually develops nuclear weapons. Most choose not to use them. Earth made different choices. How many nuclear weapons does Earth currently possess?" "I don't have access to current strategic data, sir, but based on public information available when we left Earth, approximately 12,000 warheads. The number hit Zurgoth like a physical blow. 12,000 planet-killing weapons in the hands of a species that had already proven willing to use them. Why wasn't this information included in Earth's membership application?" "Sir, with respect, your application forms asked about current conflicts and military threats. Earth has been at peace for over 40 years. We answered all questions accurately. But you didn't volunteer information about your historical conflicts. Sir, would you include every conflict your species had ever fought when applying for membership in a new organization?" Our application focused on our current capabilities and intentions, not our ancient history. 3 days after the incident with Veltar, Commandant Zurgoth stood before the Galactic Academy Council in emergency session. Representatives from 18 species filled the circular chamber, their voices raised in urgent debate. The holographic displays showed Earth's military files, and the reaction had been exactly what Zurgoth had feared. Terror. 12,000 nuclear weapons! Admiral Kextar shouted, his massive frame trembling with rage. They could sterilize half the galaxy! Their conventional forces are equally concerning, added diplomat Silvareth of the Naxari Collective. According to these files, Earth maintains a standing army of over 2 million trained soldiers. And their industrial capacity, inserted Economic Minister Bralton, they could outproduce our entire manufacturing sector within a decade. Zurgoth waited for the shouting to die down before speaking. The question before us is not what Earth is capable of, but what we should do with this knowledge. The answer is obvious, Admiral Kextar declared. We remove them from the Academy immediately. Better yet, we quarantine their entire system until we can determine if they pose a threat to galactic peace. And if they refuse to be quarantined? Zurgoth asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to consider that possibility. They're just one species, someone muttered. What could they do against the combined might of the galaxy? Zurgoth activated a holographic display. Computer, show Earth's estimated military response time for a hypothetical invasion of their home system. The display filled with tactical projections, fleet movements, defensive positions, likely casualties. The numbers were not encouraging for potential attackers. According to our analysis, any military action against Earth would result in massive casualties on both sides. Even if successful, the cost would be unacceptable. Then what do you propose? Diplomat Silvereth asked. I propose we conduct a practical assessment of human capabilities under controlled conditions. If we're going to make decisions about Earth's place in galactic civilization, we should base those decisions on facts, not fears. The Council voted to approve Zurgoth's proposal by a narrow margin. 3 days later, the Academy's most advanced combat simulation facility was reconfigured for a special test. The human cadets were told they would be participating in a routine combat assessment. 12 volunteers from other species would serve as their opponents. The exercise would test tactical thinking, combat effectiveness, and leadership under pressure. What the humans were not told was that their opponents were not volunteers. They were the Academy's top warriors, each representing their species' finest military traditions. Brixton had been chosen to represent the Gorvani. After watching Tai Wu destroy Veltar, the massive warrior was eager to restore his people's reputation. Gorvani were natural fighters, bred for strength and endurance. One human might have gotten lucky, but 12 humans against 12 alien warriors? The outcome was obvious. Silara represented the Naxari. Her species relied on speed, poison, and tactical cunning. She was confident that human reflexes could not match Naxari quickness. The other volunteers included a Catherian hunter, a crystalline, collective soldier, and warriors from 8 other species. Each was convinced that their natural advantages would overcome human trickery. The simulation chamber was configured as an urban combat zone. Destroyed buildings, abandoned vehicles, and maze-like streets created a complex battlefield. Both teams would start at opposite ends and work toward the center, where a strategic objective waited. Commandant Zurgoth watched from the observation deck as the teams prepared. Beside him stood representatives from every major species in the galaxy. They had come to witness either humanity's defeat or the confirmation of their worst fears. "Begin simulation," the computer announced. The alien team moved immediately into a standard assault formation. Brixton took point, using his massive frame to break through obstacles. Silara and the other fast movers swept the flanks. The remaining warriors provided covering fire and tactical support. It was a textbook approach that had been used successfully in conflicts across the galaxy for centuries. The humans did something different. Instead of advancing toward the objective, they dispersed completely. Within minutes, all 12 human cadets had vanished into the urban landscape. The monitoring systems lost track of them almost immediately. "Where did they go?" Admiral Kextar demanded. Zurgoth studied the displays. Advanced sensors showed no human presence anywhere in the simulation zone. It was as if they had simply disappeared. "Computer, verify human team location." Unable to comply. Human team members are not visible to standard detection methods. On the battlefield, Brixton was becoming frustrated. His team had advanced halfway to the objective without encountering any resistance. The humans were supposed to be defending their position, but there was no sign of them anywhere. "Cowards," he muttered into his communication device. "They're hiding." Silara was less certain. Her species' survival instincts were warning her that something was wrong. The humans hadn't fled. They were hunting. The first alien casualty occurred exactly 17 minutes into the simulation. The Catherian hunter, advancing alone through a collapsed building, simply collapsed. His teammates found him 30 seconds later, unconscious, and unharmed, but completely incapacitated. There was no sign of what had attacked him. The second casualty was Silara herself. One moment she was slithering through a narrow alley, the next she was waking up on the ground with no memory of what had happened. The simulation computer registered her as eliminated, but she had no idea how. By the 30-minute mark, 8 alien warriors had been eliminated. None of them had seen their attackers. None of them had fired a shot in defense. Brixton and his 3 remaining teammates clustered together in defensive formation, but it didn't help. One by one, they simply fell unconscious. No warning, no combat, no resistance. When the simulation ended, 12 alien warriors lay scattered across the battlefield, all alive, all unharmed, all completely defeated. The 12 human cadets emerged from concealment like ghosts materializing from smoke. They had been invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. "How?" Admiral Kextar whispered. Zurgoth studied the tactical analysis. The humans had used every advantage the urban environment offered. They had moved through sewers, climbed buildings, used abandoned vehicles as mobile cover. They had turned the entire battlefield into a weapon. But more than that, they had fought as a single organism, 12 individuals operating with perfect coordination toward a common goal. No wasted motion, no confusion, no hesitation. Computer, show human team communications during the exercise. Human team used no electronic communications during the exercise. Then how did they coordinate their attacks? Unknown. In the debriefing room, Sojin explained their tactics to the stunned observers. "We used hand signals and positioning to communicate. When you've trained together long enough, you don't need words. You know what your teammates are thinking." "But you eliminated our fighters without weapons," Diplomat Silvereth protested. "We used non-lethal takedown techniques," Minho replied. "Pressure points, choke holds, nerve clusters. We wanted to win the exercise, not hurt anyone." "You could have killed them?" Zurgoth asked. The humans exchanged glances. Yunji answered carefully. "Sir, the objective was to eliminate opposing forces. We interpreted that to mean incapacitation, not termination. But yes, if the rules had been different." She didn't need to finish the sentence. "How long have you been training for this type of combat?" Admiral Kextar demanded. "Since we were children," Tewu said simply. "All humans receive basic combat training. It's part of our education system." "Children?" The word came out as a horrified whisper. "Sir, human children play games that teach tactical thinking, physical coordination, and teamwork. We call them sports, but they're really military exercises." Zurgoth felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. Human children learned to fight the way other species' children learned to sing. It was as natural to them as breathing. What other capabilities do humans possess that weren't mentioned in your application? Sojin considered the question carefully. "Sir, you've seen our individual combat skills and our unit coordination. Would you like us to demonstrate our technological capabilities, our strategic planning, our psychological warfare techniques?" "Psychological warfare?" Jae-sung spoke for the first time during the briefing. "Sir, humans spent thousands of years learning how to break enemy morale without firing a shot. We can make opponents surrender through fear alone." "Demonstrate." Jae-sung looked around the room at the alien observers. When he spoke again, his voice was soft and conversational. "Sir, right now, 18 different species are wondering if they made a mistake by inviting humans to join galactic civilization. They're asking themselves if we're going to be friends or enemies. They're calculating how many ships it would take to blockade Earth and whether their species could survive the war that would follow." The silence in the room was absolute. "The beautiful thing about psychological warfare," Jae-sung continued, "is that once you start thinking about it, you can't stop. Every interaction becomes a potential threat. Every human smile becomes suspicious. Every friendly gesture might be manipulation." He smiled pleasantly at the alien observers. 6 months later, the Galactic Military Academy bore little resemblance to the institution it had been before the human arrival. The changes had begun slowly, with minor adjustments to training protocols and curriculum updates. But as word of human capabilities spread throughout the galaxy, the transformation accelerated. Tae-woo Kim stood at the front of Combat Hall 7, the same room where he had broken Instructor Veltar's arms. Now he wore the insignia of a senior combat instructor, despite being the youngest faculty member in Academy history. The 40 alien cadets seated before him listened with the focused attention usually reserved for religious ceremonies. "Today, we will discuss the difference between fighting and warfare," Tae-woo began. His voice was calm and instructional, but every cadet in the room knew they were learning from someone who could kill them all without breaking a sweat. Fighting is what individuals do. It's personal, emotional, and usually brief. Warfare is what civilizations do. It's strategic, calculated, and can last for generations. A young Gorvani cadet raised his massive hand. "Instructor Kim, how does a species transition from fighting to warfare?" Tae-woo considered the question. "They get tired of losing." The simple answer carried the weight of human history. 10,000 years of learning from defeat, adapting, improving, surviving. On Earth, we have a saying, "Losing teaches you more than winning." Every time humans lost a battle, we studied why. Every time we lost a war, we changed how we fought the next one. After 10 millennia of constant conflict, we became very good students. In the back of the room, Brixton sat quietly taking notes. The massive Gorvani, who had once mocked human weakness, now hung on every word from his human instructors. He had volunteered for additional combat training after his humiliating defeat in the simulation exercise. The experience had taught him that strength without intelligence was just a more efficient way to lose. "Instructor Kim," asked an Naxari cadet, "is it true that humans fight wars even when they're not fighting each other?" "Explain your question." "I've read that Earth maintains large military forces even during peacetime. Why keep armies if there are no enemies?" Tae-woo smiled, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Because there are always enemies. They just haven't revealed themselves yet." The statement sent a chill through the classroom. Other species maintained military forces for defense against known threats. Humans maintained them because they assumed threats would eventually appear. It was a mindset born from a world where everything tried to kill everything else. "For homework," Tae-woo continued, "I want you to research Earth's Cold War. Study how 2 human superpowers fought for decades without firing a shot. Learn how they developed weapons capable of ending civilization just to prevent each other from using them. Understand how humans can be enemies and allies simultaneously." As the class filed out, Brixton approached the instructor's desk. "Sir, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret what happened with Instructor Veltar?" Tae-woo was quiet for a moment. "I regret that it was necessary. Veltar was a good instructor in many ways, but he made the mistake of thinking that being physically dominant made him superior. And now? Now he teaches reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. It turns out that Catherians make excellent spies when they're not trying to intimidate everyone." Across the station, Sojin Park was conducting her own class in what had become known as Human Tactical Philosophy. The course was mandatory for all senior cadets, regardless of species. "Who can tell me the 3 fundamental principles of human warfare?" she asked. A crystalline collective cadet answered immediately. "Know your enemy, know yourself, and know your environment." Correct. But those are just the basics. What separates human tactics from traditional galactic military doctrine? The room was silent. This was always the difficult question. "We fight dirty," Silara said from the front row. The young Naxari had become one of Sojin's most dedicated students after her defeat in the simulation exercise. Sojin nodded approvingly. "Elaborate on that." "Humans don't follow traditional rules of engagement. They use deception, misdirection, and psychological manipulation. They turn the environment into a weapon. They make enemies fight on human terms instead of their own." Excellent. But there's something deeper than tactics at work here. Can anyone identify what makes human warfare truly different? Minho Lee, who had been observing from the back of the classroom, stepped forward. He now held the position of Director of Strategic Studies, despite having arrived at the academy as a cadet just months before. "May I, Instructor Park?" "Please." Minho addressed the class directly. "The fundamental difference is not how humans fight. It's why we fight. Most species engage in warfare to achieve specific objectives: territory, resources, political control. Humans fight for something else entirely." "Which is?" asked a Gorvani cadet. "Survival. Every human conflict, no matter how small, is ultimately about the survival of our species. We don't fight to win. We fight to ensure that something human continues to exist." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Other species fought. Wars with limited objectives and acceptable losses. Humans fought every conflict as if the extinction of their entire species hung in the balance, because to them, it always did. "This is why humans never surrender," Minho continued. "Why we continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. Why we develop weapons capable of destroying worlds. If we're going to die, we're going to take our enemies with us." In the bay, administrative section of the station, Commandant Zurgoth was meeting with his senior staff to review the academy's transformation. The statistics were remarkable. Graduation rates had increased by 30% since human instructors joined the faculty. Combat effectiveness scores had improved across all species. Most importantly, interspecies cooperation had reached levels never before achieved. "The humans have fundamentally changed how we approach military education," reported Academic Director Mel Tarn. "Their integration of psychological, technological, and tactical training has created more well-rounded officers." "What about resistance? From traditional faculty?" Zurgoth asked. "Minimal. After watching human combat demonstrations, most instructors are eager to learn new techniques. Even Veltar has requested permission to audit human classes." Zurgoth nodded. Veltar's recovery had been remarkable, both physically and mentally. The Catherian had emerged from his defeat with a new understanding of what it meant to be truly dangerous. He was no longer just a hunter. He had become a strategist. And the political situation? Chief Diplomatic Officer Ral then provided that briefing. "Mixed reactions across the galaxy. The hegemony has formally requested military cooperation agreements with Earth. The Void Hunters have declared humans worthy adversaries and invited Earth to participate in their honor combat tournaments. The Crystalline Collective wants to study human tactical matrices. And the opposition? 3 minor species have filed formal complaints about human intimidation tactics. 2 others have requested transfer of their cadets to institutions without human faculty. Approved? Denied. Academy policy requires exposure to diverse military philosophies. If they want to graduate from the premier military institution in the galaxy, they need to understand how humans fight. In the months since the demonstration, Earth's status in galactic civilization had evolved dramatically. What had begun as a simple membership application had become something approaching awe and terror. Human diplomatic missions were now treated with extreme courtesy. Human trade proposals received immediate attention. Human scientific research was fast-tracked through approval processes, not because other species respected Earth's peaceful intentions, but because they feared what might happen if those intentions changed. In his private quarters, Jae-Sung Wang was composing his weekly report to Earth's government. As the unofficial intelligence coordinator for the human cadets, he monitored galactic reactions to their activities. Political assessment, week 24, he typed. Human integration proceeding ahead of schedule. Academy transformation complete. Galactic. Military doctrine undergoing revision to incorporate human methods. Recommend continuation of current strategy. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Note: several species now actively seeking military alliance with Earth. Suggest preparation of response protocols for formal treaty negotiations. Galaxy is learning to view humans as they should have from the beginning. He deleted the last sentence. Better to let Earth's leaders draw their own conclusions. The final bell of the day chimed across the station. In Combat Hall 7, Tae-woo was finishing his evening advanced tactics class for senior instructors. The room was packed with alien faculty members who had come to learn from the young human. Remember, he concluded, the goal of military training is not to create warriors. It's to create professionals who understand that violence is sometimes necessary, but should never be the first choice. An older Gorvani instructor raised his hand. But humans seem to excel at violence. How do you reconcile this with peaceful intentions? Tae-woo smiled. Because we're so good at violence, we understand its true cost better than anyone. We know what war really means, what it takes from those who fight it, what it leaves behind.